In the news tonight, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour meets the President and board members of the Independent Election Commission to discuss proposals aimed at improving the election process. Palestinians protest in several cities across the West Bank after an inmate serving a life sentence died in prison of cancer, and Mahmoud Abbas says Israel ignored long-standing pleas to free him. And the UN Secretary General says the crisis over North Korea has gone too far and urged dialogue and negotiation rather than aggressive rhetoric and military posturing. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour met the President of the Independent Elections Commission, Abdul Ilah Al-Khatib, and Board of Commissioners. They briefed Mansour about obstacles faced by the Commission during the January parliamentary elections and said they are ready to present proposals that could prevent future setbacks. Mansour hailed the Commission's efforts of managing transparent elections. He also asked the Commission to submit a proposal that could contribute to the formulation of a new election law. A proposal by the Commission will be presented to the Cabinet for discussion of amended provisions to the law. Separately, the Prime Minister said his government will study the recommendations contained in the first Economic and Social Report and use them to bolster the national reform drive. Mansour spoke during a meeting with the President of the Economic and Social Council, Jawad Al-Anani, who handed him the 2012 Council's report. The document covers human rights issues as well as international agreements and governance. It also focuses on such sectors as financial, monetary, energy, water and environment. It also deals with challenges facing the industrial, agricultural, education, health and tourism sectors, as well as the domestic labor market, poverty and crime. Anani thanked the government for its support to the Council, enabling its report to include issues that directly touch the lives of citizens. Albanian Foreign Minister Edmond Panariti, on a visit to Jordan, met with the Prime Minister to review bilateral ties and ways to cement relations with Jordan. Mansour said Jordan is keen to enhance its cooperation with Albania, especially in the economic, educational and tourism fields. The meeting also tackled latest developments in the Middle East, mainly the Palestinian issue at the core of conflicts in the region. He said the region will not enjoy peace and stability until a just solution for the Palestinian issue is reached. Mansour also briefed the Albanian official on the humanitarian impact of the Syrian crisis on Jordan, being the biggest host of Syrian refugees. Panariti voiced his country's interest to enhance economic and tourism cooperation with Jordan. Separately, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates Affairs Nasser Joude discussed with the Albanian minister bilateral ties and regional developments. Talks also covered the crisis in Syria and the humanitarian situation resulting from the refugee influx. Joude spoke about Jordan's efforts to initiate direct negotiations between the Palestinians and Israelis, leading to a two-state solution and establishment of an independent Palestinian state. On the sidelines of the meeting, the two ministers signed a political cooperation agreement. Hundreds of Palestinians protested in the occupied West Bank after a prisoner serving a life sentence died of cancer. Maysara Abu Hamdiya's death threatened to raise tensions in the occupied West Bank, where Palestinians have held several protests in recent weeks in support of prisoners. News of Abu Hamdiya's death also touched off protests by Palestinian inmates in several Israeli prisons. Angry Palestinians in Jerusalem, Ramallah, Hebron and Gaza took to the streets in demonstration. They burned tires and hurled stones at Israeli forces, who responded back with firing stun grenades. Also in Hebron, demonstrators gathered at Abu Hamdiya's house, holding his picture and waving the Palestinian flag. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said Israel had ignored a long-standing pleas to free Abu Hamdiya, sentenced to life in prison in 2002.
This indicates the intransigence of the Israeli government and its tyranny and arrogance, particularly against prisoners for freedom in its jails. We have presented our protest to the Israeli government and all international institutions and to the world at large on this deed perpetrated by Israel, which led to the death of the prisoner Maysara Abu Hamdiya in jail.
We stay in the Palestinian lands, and Hamas has re-elected Khalid Mish'al as its leader, despite past criticism of him by hardliners in the Gaza Strip. In a statement announcing Mish'al's re-election, Hamas said its highest decision-making body, the Shura Council, has renewed its trust in the political office headed by Khalid Mish'al. Commenting on the renewal of Mish'al, a senior Fatah official said Mish'al's re-election may boost chances of reconciliation with Fatah. And over to Syria, theft and shelling have damaged a 2,000-year-old synagogue in Damascus, one of the oldest in the world. The Jobar synagogue is inside a rundown outer district of Damascus called Jobar, which was home to a large Jewish community for hundreds of years. Head of Syria's Antiquities Department said the damage has so far been light at the Jobar synagogue, but video uploaded to a social media website last month showed heavy damage to both the exterior and interior of the building. Rebels fighting to overthrow President Bashar al-Assad began moving into Jobar last July, and the area has suffered heavy shelling from government airstrikes and artillery since then. In Cyprus, 3 senior retired judges were sworn in to lead a broad-scope investigation into the affairs of politicians and top bank officials. The investigation committee will also look into who is responsible for bringing the country's finances to their current state. The Cypriot president said that even he and his own family should have their affairs looked into as part of the investigation into the country's banking crisis. The president made his remarks at the presidential palace in Nicosia, where the judges were sworn in to lead the inquiry into the country's financial crisis.
Because these days even I am under judgment, I ask you to make it a priority to investigate any accusations against me, directly or indirectly, and do not limit yourself to just my relatives, but widen your search to the legal office where I was a partner.
United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said a crisis over North Korea has gone too far and urged dialogue and negotiation to contain the situation. During an official visit to Andorra, Ban said nuclear threats are not a game and that aggressive rhetoric and military posturing only result in counteractions and fuel fear and instability. He also called on North Korean authorities to abide by resolutions from the United Nations Security Council.
Must begin to calm down, as this situation, made worse by the lack of communication, could lead down a path that nobody should want to follow. I'm convinced that nobody intends to attack DPRK because of disagreements about its political system or foreign policy. However, I'm afraid that others will respond firmly to any direct military provocation.
Earlier, North Korea announced plans to restart a nuclear reactor that has been closed since 2007, emphasizing that it is for defense. The state-owned KCNA news agency said the country would restart all nuclear facilities for both electricity and military uses. China and Japan expressed concern over the announcement and called on all sides to exercise restraint and return to talks to jointly seek a way to resolve the issue. We have more in this report.
North Korea announces plans to restart the country's nuclear facilities, including a mothballed reactor that has been closed since 2007. The Yongbyon plant is the North's only known source of plutonium for its nuclear weapons program. As well as restarting the Yongbyon reactor, a uranium enrichment plant will also be put back into operation. The news comes amid soaring regional tensions in the Korean peninsula, with the U.S. bolstering forces there after North Korea threatened to launch attacks on American bases. North Korea, one of the world's most isolated states, conducted its third nuclear test in February, but it's believed to be years away from developing nuclear weapons. In a speech on Sunday, the North's leader Kim Jong-un stressed that nuclear weapons would serve as a deterrent. North Korea claims the region is on the brink of nuclear war in the wake of U.S. sanctions. In response, South Korea has called on the North to curb its nuclear ambitions.
Caroline Kennedy may be the next U.S. ambassador to Japan. According to U.S. media reports, U.S. President Barack Obama is leaning toward picking her to be the next U.S. ambassador to one of America's top Asia allies. The Japan ambassadorship is an important diplomatic posting for the United States at a time when Washington is keeping a careful eye on China as well as North Korea. If appointed, the 55-year-old daughter of former President John Kennedy would be the first female ambassador to Japan and would replace current ambassador John Roos. Caroline Kennedy was one of the earliest backers of Obama in his first presidential campaign in 2008, and her endorsement was significant in helping Obama defeat Hillary Clinton in the Democratic presidential primary that year. However, White House spokesman Jay Carney declined to comment on whether Obama had settled on Kennedy for the post.
His time is becoming part of history, not living memory, and we need to reach across the generations in new ways.
More than 30,000 people from all 50 U.S. states attended the annual White House Easter egg roll festivities on the South Lawn of the White House. U.S. President Barack Obama and the First Family hosted the annual festivities, which included egg rolling, storytelling, sports, and cooking demonstrations. The President and the First Lady watched 2 egg rolling contests, cheering on contestants. Obama also sat down to read the children a book.
Did you see that? That's unbelievable. All right, so feel free to read along with me. Coconut tree, chicka, chicka, boom, boom. It is wonderful to see all of you, and I just want to say welcome. You guys brought the great weather. It was a little shaky this morning, but all of you did a great job sending a message upstairs, and now we've got beautiful weather.
Singing our national anthem. Please.
The 6th annual World Autism Awareness Day is celebrated by autism organizations around the world with unique fundraising and awareness events. The UN declared April 2nd as World Autism Awareness Day in 2007. People with autism spectrum disorder often have difficulties with social interaction, verbal and nonverbal communication, and show repetitive behaviors. However, many of those on the autism spectrum have exceptional abilities in visual skills, music, and academic skills. Zain Abu Sufa has the details of World Autism Awareness Day.
The Sydney Opera House lit up in blue on World Autism Awareness Day, one of many landmarks around the globe that have changed color to raise the profile of the condition. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is a complex neurobiological disorder that inhibits a person's ability to communicate and develop social relationships, and is often accompanied by behavioral challenges. According to Autism Australia, the disorder affects 1 out of 110 Australians, making it a significant public health issue.
It was never about the light or the colour blue. It was about being sick to death of being offered paltry support, and we're sick of second-rate funding and sick of what's on offer. We want more for our children and more for families of children and individuals with autism.
Japan also celebrated World Autism Awareness Day. Tokyo Tower, along with a number of other significant landmarks across the country, went blue in an effort to increase awareness of the condition. Despite heavy rain and chilly temperatures, volunteers, families with autistic children, and a number of local celebrities turned up to show their support. Japan has been at the forefront of autism research for several decades, and despite this, ignorance is still a problem. One of the greatest obstacles for autistic people and their families is acceptance.
Actually, in comparison to England or the United States, Japan has been ahead of the curve in terms of autism research. However, the average person still does not know much about the condition. Having autism or a developmental disorder is still treated with bias or prejudice. So children with this are very much learning to cope with revealing their situation to others.
Manila also joined dozens of major cities around the world which turned their buildings to blue for the day. A giant globe at the Mall of Asia on Manila Bay glowed blue as darkness fell, and around 200 people joined the parade to raise awareness of autism. Other monuments around the world that joined the event included the Empire State Building in New York, the CN Tower in Toronto, as well as churches, city halls, schools, hotels, and malls. Zain Abu Sufa, News at 10.
We begin with surfing and the Rip Curl Pro at Bells Beach, Victoria, Australia. Adriano de Souza became the first Brazilian man to win the tournament after beating American Tour rookie Nat Young in 1.5-meter waves. De Souza held the lead throughout a closely fought final, winning 16.26 points to 15.83. The victory moves De Souza up into 4th place in the championship standings, which are led by Kelly Slater of the U.S. Real Madrid continued their preparations for tomorrow's Champions League quarter-final first-leg clash at home against Turkish league leaders Galatasaray. Jose Mourinho's team are hoping to make a giant strike towards the semi-finals with a strong showing before the return in Turkey on April 9th. And in yet another controversial move, Mourinho is unlikely to start with captain Iker Casillas, despite team doctors clearing him to play last week after a 2-month injury. Instead, Mourinho appears to favor former Sevilla goalkeeper Diego Lopez. The clash reunites Jose Mourinho with Didier Drogba and Wesley Sneijder, whom he managed at Chelsea and Inter Milan. It will also be a competition between Real's Cristiano Ronaldo and Galatasaray's Burak Yilmaz, both of whom have netted 8 times and both of whom scored home and away goals in the last round. And in the Champions League quarter-final first leg being played right now between Paris Saint-Germain and Barcelona, the score so far is 0-0. And finally, for a quick look at the weather forecast for tonight with northwesterly moderate winds. As for tomorrow, a slight rise in temperature is expected, creating moderate and partly cloudy weather in most regions, but relatively hot in the Badia and the Jordan Valley. Further south in the Gulf of Aqaba, it will be fair tonight and quite hot tomorrow, with southerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, his reminder of the day's top stories. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour meets the President and board members of the Independent Election Commission to discuss proposals aimed at improving the election process. Palestinians protest in several cities across the West Bank after an inmate serving a life sentence died in prison of cancer, and Mahmoud Abbas says Israel ignored long-standing pleas to free him. And the UN Secretary General says the crisis over North Korea has gone too far and urged dialogue and negotiation rather than aggressive rhetoric and military posturing. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.